Everyone. Welcome to BhagavatSanga program. Sorry for the delay in starting the program. So, as you all know, this is our Srimad Bhagavatam program, and devotees present their realizations and their readings. Now, in this month, we are reading from Dhruva Maharaj Prayers to Lord Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, verses 6 to 17. And today, a wonderful devotee, Arjun Prabhu, will be giving the class. With that, Hare Krishna, Arjun Prabhu, you can get started.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Prabhujis and Matajis. I want to first thank Radha Damodar Prabhu and Veena Mataji for encouraging me to sign up for the presentation, and to Satyasara Prabhu and Jaya Subhadra Mataji for, of course, giving their continuous guidance in our devotional life. I would like to begin with the Pranam prayers. Om Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Kauravani Prachayane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sadi Kaura Bhakta Vrindam. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I guess we can proceed to the second slide. So the verses that we were studying in the Srimad Bhagavatam is of Dhruva Maharaj and his prayers to Lord Shri Krishna. And just a little bit of background on Dhruva Maharaj. So Dhruva Maharaj was actually the son of King Uttandapada, and his mother was Mother Suniti. And Dhruva Maharaj really wanted to get the affection of his father, and unfortunately, because his mother was not as much favored by the king, he was not able to receive the affection that Dhruva Maharaj ultimately wanted. And in many cases, because of some sort of distress, many people start to inquire spiritually. And in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 16, it describes those who actually take up to spiritual life. One is those who are distressed. Second is those who are desiring wealth. Third is the one who is inquisitive. Fourth are those who are searching for the knowledge of the absolute truth. So in this case, Dhruva Maharaj, he was also distressed, but he was ultimately, he did want to acquire material opulences. And we can first see what evidence of his distress whenever he was in conversation with his mother Suniti. And Mother Suniti, knowing very well his child and how he can really have all of his desires fulfilled, urged him to take up the practice of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna. And she, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, "You came to me crying, having been insulted by your stepmother, but I'm unable to do any good for you. But Krishna is so kind to his devotees that if you go to him, then the combined kindness of millions of mothers like me will be surpassed by his affectionate and tender dealings. When everyone else fails to mitigate one's misery, Krishna is able to help the devotee." So in this case, she knew very well that nothing else will satisfy his heart other than the practice of devotional service to Shri Krishna. And this is basically what started his devotional life, being in a position of distress and taking the guidance of his mother. And additionally, he also qualifies for one who wanted material opulences. And this was very much evident in his conversation with Narada, and he genuinely shared his heart, and basically his conditional nature, that he didn't want to. He only wanted to receive a kingdom that exceeds that of his father and even Lord Brahma. So in that case, he was very much after material opulences. And when Narada Muni, he had suggested that he be content in all circumstances, Dhruva Maharaj said that according to his conditional nature, he could not take up this understanding. And according to by Narad Muni's mercy, he was able to, and his opulence and power, he was able to guide Dhruva Maharaj according to his conditional nature and ultimately bring him towards devotional service. And I think that is the causeless mercy of the spiritual master. And so we can move to the next slide. So as mentioned, devotional service comes from the causeless mercy of the Lord and the bona fide spiritual master. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, fifth verse of which section of the chapter 9, Dhruva Maharaj becomes completely aware of the Vedic conclusion. I'll just read the translation as it is. At that time, Dhruva Maharaj became perfectly aware of the Vedic conclusion and understood the absolute truth and his relationship with all living entities. In accordance with the line of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, whose fame is widespread, Dhruva, who in the future would receive a planet which would never be annihilated, even during the time of dissolution, offered his deliberate and conclusive prayers. So it is up in this very much stage where he becomes spiritually situated that he is able to fully understand the absolute truth. And Srila Prabhupada always warned us against any sort of speculation and in terms of our practice of devotional service and in preaching. And this is very much clear that we can really understand Krishna fully once we really become spiritually situated. And that the only way for us to become spiritually situated is if we faithfully follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And that is very much revealed here in the course of this chapter, as well as in this verse, that Dhruva Maharaj was able to perform the austerities by the guidance of Narada Muni, and he was able to understand Lord Shri Krishna and be able to offer appropriate prayers to Shri Krishna once he received the causeless mercy of Shri Krishna. And that was by the touch of the conch shell of Shri Krishna. So this is so important to our spiritual life to understand these points. And that makes me, of course, deeply unqualified to lecture unless to fully encapsulate the meaning of these verses, because it is only by becoming spiritually situated we can really understand these verses and understand Shri Krishna. So the next slide, Prabhu. So by the internal potency of the Lord do we become spiritually enlivened. And this was described in a couple of the verses of this section. And here Dhruva Maharaj says in verse 6 of this chapter, "My dear Lord, you are all powerful. After entering within me, you have enlivened all my sleeping senses, my hands, legs, ears, touch sensation, life force, and especially my power of speech. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto you." So, in this case, unless we are spiritually situated, our senses, our faculties, our body, all of our bodily faculties are considered to be asleep. And even Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Thakur wrote a song based on this understanding, and he always, in that song, Jiv Jago, he referred to that we should be waking up from the clutches of Maya, and that until we do so, we are asleep. So this is something that is very clearly explained, and that even in our practical practice of, as sadhakas, whenever we're chanting and if we're performing Nam Aparad, we can say that we can, at least according to my understanding, please be correct. Bada Mataji's and Prabhuji's here, please correct me if I'm wrong. But if we are performing Nam Aparad, we can say that we're not spiritually situated. But by following the instructions of our spiritual master to chant our rounds regularly, chanting japa regularly, and following him sincerely, we will be eventually purified and come to that stage. But until we become able to chant purely, we are not spiritually situated in our chanting. And this is one of the key points to be taken from these verses. And so the spiritual acts only when we become fully surrendered. And that goes back to, of course, surrendering onto the spiritual master. And another part in the 8th verse of this section, Srila Prabhupada talks about how we cannot estimate the causeless mercy of the Lord. And by the energy of the Lord and his internal potency, by his energies, can we actually become further guided in our spiritual life and make further progress. So our spiritual progress cannot be based on our own strengths and our own determination and our own, what you call, material qualifications or scriptural understanding. That does not suffice to our spiritual progress. It is in fact the causeless mercy of the Lord that we become spiritually enlivened. So these were the main points that I had taken away from the verses. So on to the next slide. So in the end of this section of prayers, Dhruva Maharaj explains in full his complete understanding of Sri Krishna, and there's many arguments to why we should not speculate materially about the absolute truth. And Satyasara Prabhu and Jaya Subhadra Mataji really broke down that explanation to how we can correctly understand the position of Sri Krishna, and that I was very much inspired and encouraged after listening to that lecture. So in the beginning stages of devotional life, we can't preach to other people who Krishna fully is. Of course, we can repeat what our spiritual master has told us, because they have complete understanding of Sri Krishna. But by simply reciting and repeating the instructions and the words of our spiritual master, and by glorifying Sri Krishna and the spiritual master in such a way, do we become personally purified. So we should not consider ourselves so mighty in our preaching, because it is ultimately that we should be following the words of the spiritual master and become personally purified, and eventually have an effect in purifying those who we are able to engage with. And Dhruva Maharaj really explicitly, in one of the purport Srila Prabhupada talks, is that Dhruva Maharaj wanted explicitly the association of pure devotees who can understand the words of Shri Krishna and can understand the glories of Shri Krishna and who can relish Krishna in their heart. And so this is something that I've kind of come to an understanding, is that unless we have true sadhu sangha, in the sense we are associating with sadhus, is our purification extremely precise and actually quite, it goes by much quicker. This is the understanding that I'm getting. Please correct me. So, and another point that I realized, or I was trying to understand, is that, you know, Srila Prabhupada always, like I mentioned earlier, that we should be careful of our preaching, because Srila Prabhupada always says, what can our preaching really do, other than, you know, the 5 sentences we speak? What can it do? Actually just distribute his books. And that is what we are focused on. I mean, this movement is focused on, is in the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books, because that very much carries the essence of the Gita. And there is no mark of speculation. It is untouched by speculation. So it is the Gita as it is. So this is the very little understanding I've got from reading these verses, and I think more can be understood and relished once I become more and more sincere and you know, elevated and dedicated in my spiritual practice. Thank you so much, Prabhujis and Matajis. And please correct me if I made any mistakes.
Hare Krishna, Arjun Prabhu. That was a really fantastic presentation and very nice realizations. I know you had technical issues, but despite that, you did so well, and beautifully covered points. The point that, you know, devotional service comes only by the causeless mercy of Lord and the bona fide spiritual master. And even though we are in that stage where we are doing Namaprad and we are, you know, not perfect, but then if we follow the instructions of spiritual master and Supreme Lord, then we will surely get there someday when we won't be doing the Namaprad. That was a very fantastic point. And also, whatever spiritual progress we are making, it's not because of us. It's not the effort we are putting. It's also the mercy, the causeless mercy of the Lord. That was a really fantastic point. And finally, yes, we need association of Sadhu Sangha to progress. So we have to make use of the opportunity that we have been given. So really nice presentation, Arjun Prabhu. You know, it's first time Arjun Prabhu was presenting in BhagavatSanga. It was excellent. Thank you, Prabhu. Well done. With that, devotees, thank you very much for joining the BhagavatSanga program today. We will see you all next week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Arjun Prabhu, it was very nice class. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.